Hi there. In the last video, we were basically styling our Redux and React Native application. We did a round trip from the server. We came up with a very preliminary design, which you can see here. And in this video, we are going to provide a input box for users to be able to enter their own search queries. Because right now, the only search query that's happening is for the combination of banana, cucumber, and bacon. And I guess not everyone is into banana, cucumber, and bacon, and they might want to fetch recipes with different ingredients. So let's get started. You might notice that about a few videos ago, I included a few different components in this application, or in this particular component, this container component called home. I included the scroll view, the text input, the image, the touchable highlight, and the style sheet. So in the last video, we touched on the style sheet component, which allows us to render our style sheet efficiently or describe it. The touchable highlight is, of course, the button that you're pressing. The image, I think, is self-explanatory. It's like an image tag in HTML. It's for rendering images. The text is how we render text. The view is kind of like a div. And the scroll view is a special view that allows us to scroll up and down using the native scroll components of whatever underlying operating system our React Native application is running on. So the one we haven't discussed yet is the text input. And the text input is kind of like an input box that you might find in a form in an HTML page. So right now, we've got our search section and we've got our scroll section. The next step is to, of course, provide input. So let's do that. I'm going to divide this up a little bit, and I'm going to have my fetch recipes, my touchable highlight, that's good. And then just before that, I'm going to use the text input component. And it's also going to have a style, so we'll just say this is search input. It is also worth mentioning that as your application starts to grow, it's helpful to wrap these primary components or these components that React Native provides with components that are a better description of how your application is functioning. So instead of having a search section view, you might want to just create a component called search. It's worth mentioning that as your application grows and you start finding yourself using these components in different places, that rather than using view style search section, you might want to create your own component that wraps this component. And that's a way of creating composable, well-organized, and simple to reason about applications. So it's basically just like an onion that you're peeling all the way down. So anyways, in this case, we're going to create a text input, and it's going to, actually, I think it'll be a self-closing tag. So we're going to just do it this way. And the search input is going to take a few different arguments. First of all, I want my return key type to say search instead of next, I think, or return. The placeholder text is going to be ingredients. And I think I'm going to indicate that it should be comma delimited ingredients. And on change text, this is very important. We are going to have to do something when the thing changes, right? Now, I don't want the entire application to know about every single time I do a keystroke. I want that to be localized to the component. And this is a sort of a conceptual distinction you need to make in your application of what is global, what is information that the entire application needs to know about, and what is local, what is a minute transformation of data that really belongs and is the responsibility of the component. So in this case, I think it would make sense for this little search thing to live inside itself. Every single time you change text inside of an input box, you probably don't need to tell the entire world. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to modify the state of this component. And we'll have to talk about that in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to say that what the person is describing or what the value they're giving me is ingredients input. And every time they change anything, we will call this .setState. And we will set ingredients input. And this will become useful in just a moment. So we have that, and then when we render, we're going to render this .state.ingredients input. Now, this is not going to work unless we describe what the initial state is and we also make this state available. So I'm going to have to go back to an implementation where I have a constructor, which takes in props. We did this a few videos ago when we were working with the integer. And call super on props. What this does is this essentially calls the constructor on the component. And then we'll say this.state equals, and then ingredients input, and I'll just initialize the component with an empty string. Okay. Now refresh this. And I'm not seeing anything yet. And that's probably because my search input has no size. So let's change that. So we have the search section. I'll have a search input. And the search section is fine. I think I want my search section to actually use Flexbox slightly differently so that the recipes here, it sort of hangs on the right, and then the rest of it becomes a search input box. So the first thing I'm going to do is in the outer div, or the outer view, I'm going to say that my flex direction should be row. And this will allow all the elements inside of the search section to render slightly differently. And I'm going to say that the search input should have a flex of 0.7. And that also means that I'm going to have a search button. And that will be, this will have a flex of 0.3. And that should do it. I think my button, I have search button. Okay, that's good. All right, let's try refreshing that again. And there we go. We've got ingredients, comma delimited. We've got fetch recipes. If I type bacon and asparagus, and I do fetch recipes, so far so good. It's still not picking up this value, but at least it's letting me type these values. So that means that our state is functioning correctly. The last step is to, instead of do fetch recipes with a hard-coded value, we'll just say this.state.ingredients input. Refresh this again. Now if I do cheese and asparagus, always a good combination, we can see that the query is going to include cheese and asparagus, and we're going to start getting different query results. So far, so good. And if I do cabbage, grilled cabbage, great. Now, this is not the best user experience because when I search, I'm not actually getting any values immediately. So I'm going to add another bit of state. And I think with that, we'll just kind of round off this video. I want to add a searching flag, and I'm going to set that to false. And when I search pressed, when the search has been pressed, I'm going to do this.setState. I'm going to say searching is true. And then I'm going to call then here, because this is a promise. And when it completes, I'm going to say this.setState. Searching is false. So now that I have this Boolean that can go from true to false to true to false, I can start to use that in rendering my application. In fact, I can even use it when I'm describing my map. So I can say when this is not state.searching, then we run this code. So now if I refresh this again, and I say cabbage, thank you, and I do fetch recipes, it should show me recipes of cabbage. And then when I do steak, it should go blank, and then it'll show me steak. And so the last little bit that I want to add to this is just an indication that I'm actually searching. So again, simple ternary operator, we're going to say this.state.searching, question mark, text, searching, ... And then if I'm not searching, just return null. Refresh again. search for steak, I get searching, cabbage, fetch recipes, searching. And there you have it. In this video series, just to recap, we started with just basic Mac operating system and Xcode. We got React Native up and running. We got the Redux packages in place. We hooked it all up to an API, talked a little bit about some architectural concepts behind Redux, and built a very simple application. I hope this has been really useful and helpful. I'm curious to know what you think, and I'm still learning and developing my own understanding in this area, and hopefully in sharing this information, I'll be able to learn from you and what you're working on. So feel free to tweet at me or email me or follow me wherever you find me. I'm John Lebensold, and thanks a lot for sitting through this tutorial series.